Okay, here we go. So the idea tonight is to kind of walk us a little bit through the Hagadah. The idea being that we want to prepare ourselves. A number of us, it's going to be the first time that we are going to be hosting a Seder. And even if that's not the case, it's always a good idea to kind of go through and map out the Hagadah before Pesach comes. The key is preparation. And the idea of the Shiur is to give us a bit of direction in what to focus on. It can be overwhelming a little bit. You want to know what to focus on as we go through the Hagadah. But at the end of the day, each person has to prepare on their own. One has to tailor-make it to their clientele, to themselves, to those who are at the Seder, so we can give a general structure, a framework of the Hagadah, and each individual then obviously is encouraged to go through it on their own with that framework and then make it appropriate to each specific Seder. Now, a few words of introduction before we get into a general theme, and then I want to go through the first half at least of Magid and point out little Ha'ara's little points at each critical junction. So the first thing we have to realize is that the Pesach Seder, to a large extent, is a wild card. And what I mean by that, and this especially applies when dealing with children, that there are years that I have prepared so well for it, for the Seder, and I was ready, armed with all my Divrei Torah and all my props and all a whole bunch of geschmack things to do with the Seder. And what happened was that it just didn't work out. The kids didn't nap out of Yom Tiv, and they were fighting, and they weren't interested. Had this great vort that I wanted to stuff down their throats, and they weren't interested. And I was getting frustrated that, well, what do you mean? It's a great vort. How can you? And so there are years that you prepare really well, and it just falls on its face from the parents, from the Baal HaSeder's perspective. And then there are years where a person didn't really get a chance to prepare at all, and it just works out perfectly. The kids are well behaved, and they're interested, and they're engaged. The number one thing to is as follows. There have been years that I have felt personally that my Seder was a failure, the ones that I've ran, and there are years I felt it was great. But if you ask my children, and if I think back to the many years that I had to sit down with my parents when I was a child, every Seder was a home run. So from the kids' perspective, it takes a little pressure off the adults. From the kids' perspective, the Seder is geschmack, the Seder is fun. It's only from the adult's perspective, from the one who's running the Seder, who has his plan about what he wants to do. But sometimes, as we say, man plans and God laughs. Sometimes you have everything set and nothing goes. You have nothing set and everything goes. At the end of the day, from the kid's perspective, from the guest's perspective, it's always a home run. The Seder is always amazing. A kid always has positive associations with the Seder, and that's important to keep in mind. The main idea at the Seder is it should be geschmack, it should be fun, not in a light-headed way, just joking around, having a good time and spilling wine. It should be fun in a tachlis-dik, musar-dik way, but not to feel that frustration and not to try to push. In other words, like you say, it's a wild card. We have no idea what's going to happen. You have no idea what the feeling is going to be at that table. All you can do is prepare your best, and then whatever happens, happens, and just realize that the Seder always is a success, even if that which I prepared didn't end up coming into fruition the way I wanted it to. But the Seder is always a success. Another thing to keep in mind, as we'll see soon, that the main mitzvah of the night is the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. Right? That's the main mitzvah of the night, and that's what we want to discuss together tonight. And that's all about telling over a story. Now, how do you tell a story? What's a good storyteller? So I'll illustrate with a Ma'aseh Shahaya, a true occurrence. Rav Ruvain Leichter, a big Rav in Eretz Yisrael, was when he was a little kid. He grew up in Switzerland, and he once went with his older brother to the library to take out some books. Each took out books. They came back 2 weeks later to return the books, to take out new books, and his older brother took out the same book again. He renewed the same book. He went back a third time to the library to take 2 weeks later to take out some more books, and his older brother again wanted to renew the same book. This young Ruvain Leichter was embarrassed that his brother, it's like a weird thing. Why is he taking out the same book twice. It's going to be his third round that he's reading this book. And so he said to the librarian, he said that, my brother's a little bit crazy. He's reading the same book 3 times. And this non-Jewish librarian told him, he's not crazy. He's a good reader. And the concept is that a story and storytelling, it's not only about relating new information to the person who you're telling the story. That's not the main nakuda of telling a story. A good storyteller can tell the same story 100 times, and the 100th time is as thrilling, if not more thrilling, than the first time. It's not about conveying new information. Listen, it's always recommended at the Seder to get new information, but even if one didn't have a chance, it's going through the same story again. And what it is, it's not reading off a sheet of paper of different vertlach that I heard from different people or I saw in different Haggadahs. A good storyteller is someone who believes in the story, who enjoys telling the story, and that it always is a success. So something to keep in mind, that we're going to go through Be'ez Hashem, a theme for the Haggadah, some ha'arazam Haggadah. At the end of the day, every person has to make it their story. It has to be my story that I make my own. I'm not chopping from here and chopping from there, and a vort from the Malbin, and a vort from Rabbi Soloveitchik, and a vort here and a vort there. It's about painting a picture that I'm painting. It's my telling over of the story of the Sipur, Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's what a story is. So with those 3 introductions, we'll begin now, and we'll relate a basic theme in the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now, as we go through this, keep in mind, it's good to take notes and the nakudas that we cover, but also keep in mind creative ways to relate the information over to those at your Seder. Right? We're not copy-pasting. We're going to discuss concepts here, but the kunz is going to be how it's said over. Just like in Haggadah itself, it's all about question, answer. It's prodding the child to ask questions. It's doing things that are strange in order to get the child to ask the question. So it's not just the content. All I can give you now is content. But each person has to figure out, has to know themselves, has to know their kids, know their guests, whoever's going to be at the Seder this year. No one's going to have guests really, but whoever's the people, the participants at the Seder, know who they are and think creatively how to best give over the information. There are 5 mitzvahs that we fulfill at the Seder. And again, this can be a question you begin the Seder off by asking, okay, who can tell me the five mitzvahs of the Leil HaSeder? And parenthetically, what we do at our Seder, I have a big bowl of chocolate chips. Chocolate chips are great because you can give a kid 30 and it's not a big deal. Right? Giving candies, the 30 candies already is not that healthy. But 30 or 40 chocolate chips, nish gefährlich. So I have a bowl of chocolate chips, and every kid who asks a question gets a chocolate chip, right? So then they start asking like foolish questions, like why is the wall this color? And so you have to tell them that if you ask a question I don't like, I take away 2 chocolate chips. You have to make a way that they don't take advantage of the system. And also they were fighting over who gets to ask the question. Said, if you ask a question, every kid gets a chocolate chip. It's a way to engage them, to encourage them, to keep them awake, and to get them to ask questions. So this is a good question. Who can name me the 5 mitzvahs of the Leil HaSeder? So we have one is Achilas Matzah, that's a mitzvah deraisa. The second one is Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's the other mitzvah deraisa we have at the Leil HaSeder. 2 mitzvahs deraisa at the Leil HaSeder is the eating of the matzah, which takes place after Magid, after we go through the story, as well as saying over the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of the leaving and the redemption from Egypt. Then we have the 4 cups of wine. That's the 3rd mitzvah Salayla, is the 4 cups of wine. The 4th mitzvah is eating the maror, which Bisman Azed, this day and age, is Midrabanan. That's the 4th mitzvah, eating the bitter herbs, the 4th mitzvah of the night. And the 5th mitzvah of the night is saying Hallel. We say the Hallel and we praise, we thank Hashem. Again, the basic theme is Hakaras HaTov. We were slaves, Hashem took us out, and we have to thank Hashem. That's in a nutshell what we're doing at the Seder. If you notice, all 4 mitzvahs really are coming as, so to speak, props, as facilitators for the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. The Achilas Matzah we'll see with Halach Ma'anya, with the beginning of Magid. The Achilas Matzah is there, it's the Lechem Oini. It's there to remind us of the bread of affliction, the poor man's bread, to remind us of the Koishi Yashibud, how difficult the Shibud in Mitzrayim was, the slavery in Egypt was. That's the Matzah. The wine is connected, it correlates to 4 languages of redemption, the 4 Lashonis of Geula, which that corresponds to our going out, to becoming free people. The Maror represents the Koish Yashi, but again, the Mariris, the bitterness, the sweat, the tears, the salt water, right? The difficult parts of the Shibud. And the Hallel is thanking Hashem. So if you think about it, all the mitzvahs halayla, and it's even the matzah, which is a biblical mitzvah, and it's a mitzvah in and of itself. So if I eat the matzah, and I don't tell over the story, I fulfill the mitzvah of matzah. But that being said, even though it's an independent mitzvah, but it also is there to facilitate, to serve as a prop, as a physical representation of the shibud, of the slavery. So we see that all the mitzvah laila are really all coming to help us with the Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. And that seems to be the pinnacle, the apex, the tachlis, the goal of the night is the Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. So what's so special about Sipur, about the story of Yitzias Mitzrayim? And it's not only on the night of Pesach, it's a special mitzvah to have a discussion back and forth, and to be Masla B'Gnus, Messiah B'Shvach, to start off with the negative and end with the positive, and to say certain halachas about the story of Pesach. But we have a mitzvah twice a day throughout the year to remember leaving Egypt, and we have countless mitzvahs that are Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. So we see that Yitzias Mitzrayim takes this very important role in our entire Avodas Hashem. What is it about the Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim that's so fundamental to our religion? To the point that Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver was a student of Reb Chaim Volozhiner, who was the prize student of the Vilna Gaon. And he has a Hagadah. This is his Hagadah called Yad Mitzrayim. And this is what I've been using the past few years. It's a complicated Hagadah, but it's an excellent thematic breakdown of the whole Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. And he writes that Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim is the foundation and the root of Avodas Hashem. So we have to understand what we're doing next Wednesday night, a week from this Wednesday night. This is the most fundamental part of Avodas Hashem. Those of us who have been learning Chovos Levavos last week, the Chovos Levavos he understands bitachon as being the fundamental aspect of Avodas Hashem, and we'll see if this Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver is shtims, if it goes together with that Chovos Levavos. But says Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, the most fundamental, basic part of the service of Hashem, which is why we're here, is the Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. And we see all the mitzvahs halayla, the mitzvahs of the night, as well as many, many mitzvahs throughout the year, all come to our Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. So again, what is so fundamental about this mitzvah? So it says Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver that the Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, the story of the Jews leaving Egypt, brings home 3 fundamental concepts. That you can't be Oved Hashem, you can't worship Hashem without it. Number 1, the Metzias Hashem, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu exists. Hashem is there. That was clearly seen by every single person in the entire world. Everybody heard about Yitzias Mitzrayim. And everyone recognized that there's an entity that created the world. There's a Metzias Hashem. That's the first aspect, the first fundamental concept, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, that took you out of Egypt, says that the first one of the Seres HaDibros. Metzias Hashem, that's number 1. Number 2, Hashgacha Pratis. We witnessed with the Jews leaving Egypt that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is involved with every Jew. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is involved with the Jewish people. And everything, as we discussed in the Divrei Chizuk a couple of weeks ago, everything went Midah Keneged Midah. The Yidden who witnessed what went on in Mitzrayim saw that Hashem paid back the Egyptians mamish tit for tat exactly. And they saw that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't just create the world and let it go on its own, like the Amalekian philosophy espoused. They saw that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is involved in every single aspect of our lives. And he cares about every single Jew down to the smallest detail of their life. Hashgacha Pratis, Hashem is involved in every aspect of our life. That was the second fundamental concept that we learned by the Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. And the third concept, which is really the culmination of the Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, and this also is a great point of conversation at the Seder, and that is that the world is dependent on Torah and mitzvahs. So you might wonder, no, that's true, and it's very nice, and we had a Matan Torah 49 days, 50 days after we left Mitzrayim. It's definitely true. But is that really part of the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim? I mean, if you ask your child, what's the conclusion? When did the whole story end? Most likely, they're going to tell you it ended after the Yam Suf went back and covered up and drowned the Egyptians, and the Yidden were free. And they turned their backs on Egypt, and they went into the desert. That was the end of the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. Says Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver that is not the end. And if it would have ended there, it would have been a complete failure. The goal of leaving Egypt was not actualized until Matan Torah. And he says it's an open pasuk in Chumash, the pasuk in Shmos, in Paragimel pasuk Yud Beis. Now again, I'm saying over information now, but when dealing with children and when dealing with people who are not so familiar, and even just with regular people, one has to be creative how you bring that out. So it's a great question to throw out. What was the point of leaving Egypt? Like why does Hashem do it? So we can be safe. I'm not going to be, okay, but why does Hashem want us to be safe? Why does Hashem not want us to be slaves? What do we gain by being free? What's the definition of free? Free means do whatever you want. But that's not what we think free is. Try to get the children and the participants at the Seder to realize themselves that just leaving Egypt and being plunked into the desert, you didn't really achieve that much. So you have physical and mental stability. But that's what life is about, just not to be slaves. Obviously, the whole point of the Yetzias Mitzrayim was to receive the Torah at Har Sinai. Chazal tell us, Ein lecha ben chayrin ela mi she'osek b'Torah. A true free person is a person who involves himself in Torah study, who lives the life of Torah mitzvahs. Because if a person doesn't have Torah, he'll be a slave to his desires, he'll be a slave to money, he'll be a slave to status symbols, whatever it might be. But when a person has Torah, he's truly a free person. So freedom is not worth that much in the grand scheme of things if it's not accompanied by Torah as well. So the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim does not end with the Kriyas Yam Suf, with the parting and the coming back of the Yam Suf. It ends with we counted from Yetzias Mitzrayim 49 days to the 50th day that we received the Torah. That's the real end of the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. And that's a chiddush for many people. And that's something I would suggest bringing out, not as I'm doing now as a monologue, but as a question, as a back and forth. The Yesod, and we'll discuss why that is hopefully soon, the Yesod of the Seder is to engage the audience. It's not for the Bala Seder to get up and, like we said before, just throw out ideas. The whole point is to prompt people to ask. So everything we're discussing tonight, one has to review it afterwards and figure out a way. Take a pen to paper or use your computer and print it out before Yom Tov, obviously. And how am I going to bring out these points? I want everyone else to say what I'm writing down in my notes. My goal for the Seder is to say as few words as possible, and I want to prod the children and the participants to basically run the Seder. I'm going to direct them, but I want them to realize themselves. So I'm not just going to say, guys, I'll tell you a big chiddush. The point of leaving Egypt was to go to Har Sinai. No, I want them to realize it themselves. And that's what I'm going to try to do with the Seder, is throw out those questions and try to guide them into answers. What's the open pasuk that's the source? At the point of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the ultimate goal was to receive the Torah. In Perek Gimel, pasuk Yud Beis, in chapter 3. In chapter 3, verse 12, the pasuk says, Hashem is telling Moshe Rabbeinu, this is the sign that I sent you, when you take out the nation from Egypt, ta'avdun es Elokim ala har hazeh. You will worship Hashem on this mountain. Right? So we see from there that the point of Mitzrayim was to be over Hashem and Har Sinai. But again, don't say that over directly. Have them speak it out. So that's Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver's basic idea, his basic premise. He brings the Arizal. We get a little Kabbalistic. It always excites people to get a bit Kabbalistic. And he says, the Arizal says, that the Golus Mitzrayim, the exile in Egypt, is compared to a pregnancy. The pasuk says in Sefer Dvarim, Hashem came, lakachas lo goy mikerev goy, to take a nation from within another nation. So the imagery is, the parable is that Mitzrayim was the mother and the Yidden was like the fetus inside the mother. When the baby's inside the mother, the baby is completely concealed. There's nothing you can't see. It's totally subsumed by the mother, consumed by the mother. And that's how it was. Halalu oivdei avodah zara, v'halalu oivdei avodah zara. The Malach Yeshara said, the angel said, why should we save the Yidden? Everybody's doing avodah zara. The Yidden were in the 49th level of Tumah. They were very low. You couldn't even tell, even though we have other chazals that say they were mitziyonim sham, but one chazal for sure says that they were on a very low level. And you almost couldn't tell them apart. They were actually part and parcel of the Egyptian nation. And what HaKadosh Baruch Hu did is he came and he took Lakachas Goy Mikarev Goy. He took the Jews out. It was a birth. The Yetzias Mitzrayim is compared to a birth where the child now gets his or her own identity. And that really happened on Har Sinai when we received the Torah. We left Egypt, we became physically recognizable as a separate nation. But it's only until we got the Torah that we really had our own self-identity and became a completely independent nation. Chametz and matzah, right, have almost the same letters. Chametz, if I was fancy, I could put it on a whiteboard on this computer, but I'm not that fancy yet. Depends how long this thing lasts and how much we have to use Zoom. Chametz is ches mem tzadik. Matzah is mem tzadik also, but hey. So the difference between chametz and matzah, and again, I would suggest asking this as a question to get people to be active and start talking, is a ches and a hey. So chametz has a ches, matzah has a hey. They both have mem and tzadik. Says the Arizal, the ches is a closed letter. Chametz, which represents our time in Egypt before the redemption, we were closed off, like a fetus inside the mother. And matzah, the ches, turns into a hey. There's an opening, and there's a birth. A cute little point of conversation at the Seder table. What's the difference between chametz and matzah? And the Gra has a whole shtickle, we won't get into it, but ha lach ma'anya is really hey lach ma'anya. It's showing that hey, that letter hey, is the difference between chametz and matzah. So to summarize this concept, the theme of the Seder, and this is the basic structure that as you go through it, look for ways to ask questions, look for ways to always reinforce this concept, is that the point of the Yetzias Mitzrayim was to take a nation that was totally consumed and subsumed by an idolatrous nation, and you couldn't even see them, and give them their own identity on Har Sinai with the Torah and mitzvahs. And that's what runs the world. And the HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world as well. So it's these two things that we saw in Yetzias Mitzrayim. There's a mitzvah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem is interested, hashgacha pratis, in our lives, and Torah and mitzvahs are what affect the world. Those, and therefore, the culmination of the Tzipur Yetzias Mitzrayim is really the Matan Torah. So that's the theme that we have to reinforce as we go through the Seder. I personally use, as we mentioned before, this concept of midah keneged midah to show how whatever the Egyptians did to the Yidden went back to the Egyptians. And you see how Hashem takes care of the Jews. And Hashem takes care of you always. Again, during this period where we're all facing this health crisis, this is more appropriate than ever to try to instill in ourselves and our children this concept that HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes care of us. We're definitely not in as dire a situation as the Jews in Egypt. And they cried out to Hashem, and Hashem answered their tefillahs. That's the recurring theme, what we're trying to shtup, to lagarain, to imbue in our children, in ourselves, in the guests at the Seder is a Jew is in a hard spot. He's in pain. He cries out to Hashem. He does tshuva, does mitzvahs. Hashem listens, even if he's not worthy, and Hashem takes him out. Right? That is what we have to reinforce in ourselves, that we really believe this, as well as in the participants at the Seder. So that's the basic, I would say, context that the Seder should be run within. Now I would like to go through the different parts of the Seder. Really start from Magid. I want to start from Magid. Now Magid itself, that's where we have, we go through the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Hagadah guides us. But as an aside, there's two ways to go through the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. And I've used different things, different years. And I have to improvise as I'm going through it, because sometimes you lose chevra, sometimes it's very late and the kids are hungry and you want to get the Shulchan Aruch, and so you really have to, it's a fluid matzav. You have to keep everything in mind. don't be too rigid. Again, we mentioned before. For a successful Seder, you cannot be rigid, especially when dealing with little children or younger children. You have to go with the flow and see if they're kvetching, then don't spend time in Magid, get through Magid and go to the Suda, and then you can go through the Siyat time. If they're taka engaged, and sometimes it's before the clock change, so they're more engaged, then you can schlep it a bit during Magid. It really depends on the situation. But there are two ways you could do this. One way, which we're going to do tonight, Be'ez Hashem, in the remaining time we have, is we're going to go through the Magid and describe what the Baal Hagadah is doing and put in different facts and features of the story as we read the Magid. That works for more mature audiences for sure. Otherwise, the whole Magid doesn't make sense. The other mahalach is to take, let my people go, let my nation go, let my people go, or take a Me'am Loyas in English, or the little Medrash says, take one of those storybooks and go through the details of the Yetzias Mitzrayim. Forget the Hagadah. For the kids, some kids in some ages, forget the Hagadah and familiarize yourself with the Midrashim, with the Ma'amari Chazal surrounding the story, and act it out. Have them act it out. We always have props. So when it comes to Tzvardeya, we throw the frogs. Now my teenage girls, they'll laugh, but they're more interested in hearing, more mature concepts on Haggadah. The little kids love it, and there's a positive association. And when there's Arov, I'll tell you a secret. In the past, I have acted like a wild animal at the Seder. And I'll jump up and down, I'll grab my kids, and I'll try to bite them and do all these things. That's also part of it. I mean, there's one track which definitely works for the younger kids, is to enact the story. Forget Halach Manya, and they'll say the Manishtana, but Rami Oimin Avi, all the words in Magid are not going to work for kids under the age of 13, 14, depending on the maturity level. And for that, you have to pick up an English Me'am Loyes, in our school Chumash. Go through the story and think about how I can make this geschmack, I can make this thought-provoking. Even for a 10-year-old kid, you can ask questions about, how would you feel if, you couldn't eat what you wanted to eat and you had to eat at a certain time. A person has to figure out a way, has to know their child, figure out a way to make it into a real story. But what we're going to do tonight is go through the Magid, which will work for more mature audiences and even for kids depending on their mood. So Magid starts off, if you have Hagadah in front of you, great. Everyone's got a different page. I should have mentioned to bring a Hagadah, but you don't have to have Hagadah. Magid starts off with Holach Ma'anya. So there's three concepts in this first part of Magid. So we have Holach Ma'anya di achalu avasana ba'ar di Mitzrayim. This is the bread of affliction. Right? And we hope we have already broken the matzah, the middle matzah, yachas, very broken. And we raise the matzah and we say, this is the bread of affliction that our fathers ate in the land of Egypt. Right? That's part number one. Kol dichvin yesev v'yechol, kol ditzrich yesev v'yifsach. Part number two is, whoever is hungry, let him come and eat. Whoever is needy, let him come and celebrate Pesach. Part number three, Hashata Hacha, now we are here. L'shana haba ba'ar di Yisrael. Next year we should be in Eretz Yisrael. Hashata Avdei, which is a fascinating concept that we're saying. This is the story of our redemption. And we say now we are slaves. L'shana haba b'nei chayrin. In the future, next year, we should be b'nei chayrin. So we have this three levels. We have this proclamation, this is the bread of affliction. Then whoever wants to eat, come take something to eat. And then here we're slaves, and now we're in Chutz La'aretz. The Ez Hashem should be in Eretz Yisrael as free men next year. Three different things. As an aside, why are you inviting guests now? Now we already began the Seder. Usually, even if it's not Corona season, the door is closed and the guests you invite weeks before. So why at the Seder are we inviting in guests? So I once heard, in the name of Rabbi Soloveitchik, that a slave can't invite guests. A slave doesn't have his own time. A slave doesn't have his own meal. It's a statement. It's not practical. No one's opening the door and yelling out on North Hills Drive, whoever has no Seder, please come. No one's doing that. But it's a proclamation of a free man, the ability to invite a guest. A very interesting, nice concept. That's what Rabbi Soloveitchik says. But why do we start off with this halach ma'anya? Why do we start off with, this is Magid, this is the Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, right? Why does that start with saying, this is the bread of affliction, if you're hungry, come eat, hopefully next year we'll be freed, now we're still slaves. What's going on? So Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chavar, and again, these are questions to put forth to the participants of the Seder. They don't sound like a broken record already, but that's the concept. Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chavar says that if you think about it, there are two mitzvahs of matzah. There's a mitzvah of eating matzah, as we'll call it, but it's not quite, a commemoration of the fact that on Tezvav, the 15th of Nisan, the Jews were forced out quickly out of Egypt, and they didn't have time for the bread to turn into bread. It only turned into matzah. They didn't have time to let the bread leaven, so it was made within 18 minutes, and it was matzah. So we're commemorating a historical occurrence. But then he points out that in Parshas Bo, in that Perek Yud Beis in Shmos, HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands Klal Yisrael to eat matzah at night, the night of the 15th, the night before they left. Now that can't be as to commemorate a historical occurrence, because it didn't happen yet. So there are two obligations to eat matzah. One is that, or the two concepts of matzah more. One is that of, they didn't have a chance to turn to chametz, they were rushed out. Then there's a mitzvah of matzah on the Leil HaSeder, which is not because of that. It's a mitzvah HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, eat matzah. Now the mitzvah of matzah on the Leil HaSeder, we actually have a positive commandment to eat matzah. The rest of the days of Pesach, again, the Chutz La'aretz is day 1 and day 2. But the rest of the days of Pesach, there is no mitzvah to eat matzah. If one wants to eat pas, wants to eat bread, you can't eat chametz, it has to be matzah. But you don't have to eat matzah. You can go the rest of those days, technically speaking, eating fruits and vegetables and meat and chicken and fish and not eating any matzah. But on the first night of Pesach in the Chutz La'aretz, the first 2 nights, you have a positive commandment to eat matzah, and that matzah has to be lechem oini. It has to be a poor man's bread. You can't add fruit juices. The Sfardim, the Chaber Paskins, they can have fruit juices in their matzah. That's like a bread of a rich person. On the first night of the Seder, that matzah, which is not commemorating leaving Egypt, that matzah, which was Hashem's command to us, the first mitzvah we got was to eat that matzah for the yechidim, for the individuals, was to eat the matzah. That has to be a lechem oini. That has to be just bread and just flour and water and nothing else. It can't be any oil. Everyone agrees to that. It can't be oil. It can't be eggs. It can't be grape juice. No juices. Just simple water and flour. That's the lachem anya. So we start off the Seder by saying, this is the poor man's bread. The mitzvah of eating matzah on Leil HaSeder, which is not because they didn't have time to bake bread. A separate mitzvah to make a poor man's bread is we have to recognize that in order to be successful as Jews, our indulgence in Gashmias, our indulgence in the physical world has to be what we need to survive. That does not mean, halach l'maisa, today in 2020, we eat bread and water on the floor and that's it. Right? Whatever we need to survive, as opposed to indulging in luxuries that we don't need. So if you want to go from being oivdei avodah zarah, which the Jewish people were going from being idol worshippers, to becoming free men, the first mitzvah they were given to extract them from the status of idol worshippers to becoming oivdei Hashem was lechem oini, a poor man's bread, realizing, teaching us that Gashmis is there just to help our ruchnis. All the Gashmis, all the physical things that we have is just there so our minds can be free and we can dedicate ourselves to the service of Hashem. That's why the halach ani continues, whoever's hungry, come and eat. The point of food is to fill us up. It's not about having this, I mean, again, we have Einik Shabbos, there is a concept of enjoying the food, and that brings us close to Hashem. But there is a point where it goes too far. And the point is, that really the point of eating is to fill oneself up. So kol dichvin yesev v'yech, if you're hungry, come fill yourself up. Kol ditzrich, if you need food, yesev v'yifsach, pass over. Eat the food as a means to an end to serve a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And if we do that, if we relegate the Gashmis, the physicality, to the realm of what I need to survive, which can mean going out for a steak dinner once in a while. I don't think that means that you have to only have bread and salt and water, right? Whatever you need to survive, then L'Shana Haba will be in Eretz Yisrael. Then L'Shana Haba will be Bnei Chayrin. So the Baal Hagadah is telling us right from the start, if you want to understand the entire Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim and you want to replicate that in one's own life and go from being a person, not obviously doing Avodah Zarah, but you want to end up being that Ben Chayr and Har Sinai, it's by making sure that the Lachma is a Lachma Anya. by making sure the bread is a poor man's bread. And we relegate the Gashmias to the realm that it should be. That is Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver's explanation of the Halach Ma'anya. The Beis Halevi, a second idea, he also asked the question, he understands Halach Ma'anya because we're starting off the Seder, and this is the poor man, this is what we ate. On a simple level, we're saying this is what we ate when we were in Mitzrayim, right? We were slaves. This is part of the bread of affliction. Why do we throw in chesed? Why do we throw in the fact now that, okay, if anyone needs a meal, come to my house. I'm going to give you tzedakah. Why do we do that? He explains that, says in the Beis Halevi, that the Jews did not really deserve to leave Mitzrayim. A main calculation of Hashem in getting us out of Mitzrayim was the Mitzrayim, the Egyptians deserved to get punished. Even though we didn't deserve to leave based on our merit, he said we were in the 49th level of Tumah, one more, we would have been finished. HaKadosh Baruch Hu in his infinite chesed took us out. Hashem saw, if he lets it go any further, we're going to be finished. So it was a chesed from Hashem that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. He points out, we have many mitzvahs today in Golus that we can't keep. I don't know if you realize, but Shabbos, we can't keep Shabbos in its entirety. If we can't bring the Musafim, the Korbanos, they brought in the Beis Hamikdash on Shabbos, so we're lacking in our Shmira Shabbos. Forget the Yom Tovim. There are so many mitzvahs, says the Beis Halevi, that we cannot fulfill now that we're in Golus. But there's one mitzvah that we can fulfill to the utmost, and that's tzedakah. So the Baal Hagadah puts right in the beginning this concept of tzedakah to mechazik us, that you should know, first of all, even if one does not deserve a redemption, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will still bring the redemption. Just like in Egypt, it came through chesed, it comes through chesed now, and if we do chesed with others, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will do chesed with us. That's why this non sequitur of all of a sudden, whoever wants, come and eat, gets put right into the beginning of the Haggadah to realize the whole redemption from Egypt was a chesed from Hashem. We were not worthy. We should give chesed to others, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give chesed to us and bring us to the final redemption as well. That's the basic concept in Halach Ma'anya. We move along now to the Manishtana, right? So this is the Manishtana. I'm sure many people have the minhag. All the kids say it, and all the adults say it as well. Everyone does their shtick. They stand up on the chair, and they think they're all, nice and kosher, which is good. And they say the Manishtana. You'll have a kid, your 4-year-old, your 3-year-old, your 6-year-old, who will be practicing for the past month Manishtana. And it gets to Leila Seder, and you're so excited they're going to do it, and they don't want to do it. It's happened to me, that the kid is so cute, and we have guests and company, it's geschmack, and the kid, that's it, doesn't want to do it. So again, you can't get upset. That's the way it is. Doesn't have to do it. We're not going to force anyone. We're not going to force anyone anything they don't want to do. Okay, the Manishtana, the Malbim, explains that the Manishtana is a very brief summary of the entire Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. And again, I'm going to say information over now. The idea is to turn that into a question answer, into a dialogue at the same. There are 4 questions asked in the Manishtana. We eat chametz matzah all of the nights, and on Pesach only matzah. We eat different vegetables, many vegetables, all the nights, and on Pesach it's only maror. On other nights we don't dip anything in liquid even once. On Halayla Azah Pesach twice, we dip things twice into salt water on Pesach. And all the nights we eat sitting and reclining, and on Pesach we recline. Now, the Baal Hagadah is hinting to the following. In the slavery in Egypt, there was a double slavery. We discussed this last year in the women's year, I think. There was a physical slavery, and there was a psychological slavery. The Manishtana hints to each concept. The matzah is a psychological slavery. The matzah is a poor man's bread. Matzah itself it's not hard to eat. I mean, I happen to enjoy eating matzah. Matzah is not the slavery itself. Matzah is the realization that I can't make my own menu. I'm not the buying. I'm not in control of what I eat. This is the bread I'm given. It's a poor man's bread. I have nothing with which to make bread. It symbolizes that psychological shibud. Mitzrayim was a place that no slave ever escaped. That was a tremendous psychological blow to the Jews. The Mitzrayim gave the women men's jobs. They were schlepping heavy things. It's horrible physical torture. He gave the men the women's jobs. What's so hard? So you have to make breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You have to deal with the kids. You have to do laundry. What's so hard? Psychologically, it's very hard for a man, I can tell you from personal experience, to do a woman's jobs. So there's a psychological shibud as well as in addition to the physical shibud. The matzah represents the psychological enslavement. The maror is the physical slavery. It's you taste the maror, your eyes tear, your face turns red. That symbolizes the physical shibud. The matbilim, the dipping, the tibul sweetens, the dipping the potato, whatever it is, the karpas, that sweetens the shibud. That refers to the physical salvation, the physical redemption. And the leaning, the reclining, that represents the psychological redemption, that a free man is able to recline and a poor person and a slave is not able to recline. So in a very remezdik way, it's hinted to in the Manishtana, these double themes. You had a physical and a psychological shibud. That's the first two questions of the Manishtana. Then we have the physical and the psychological redemption, which are the second two questions of the Manishtana. Okay. That's Manishtana. Then we come to Avadim Hayinu. Avadim Hayinu is the response to the Manishtana. Now the kids can't leave after Manishtana. In some places, that's the apex of the kids, and they're out of the picture. That can't be. The Manishtana is the question, and that's just the beginning. If the kid's 3 years old, okay, fine. Once the kid's 5, 6 years old, we have to make sure the kid stays to hear the answer to the Manishtana. So how do we answer? We say, Avadim Hayinu l'far b'Mitzrayim. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. V'yotzieinu Hashem Elokeinu misham. Hashem took us out biyad chazaka b'zor netuya, with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. V'ilu hoytzei Kodesh Baruch Hu esav aseinu b'Mitzrayim. Hashem wouldn't have taken us out of Mitzrayim. Hare'anu uveneinu, we and our children, uvnei vaneinu, and our grandchildren, mishubadim hayinu l'far b'Mitzrayim. We would still be slaves to Pharaoh in Mitzrayim. So again, the answer to the Manishtana is one, we were slaves and Hashem took us out. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Mitzrayim and Hashem took us out. Pharaoh being a tremendous evil Russia, strict, ruthless dictator. Mitzrayim, a land that no Eved ever escaped until 2 million Yidden left together in the middle of the day. Not one slave ever escaped from Egypt. And Hashem took us out. That's part one of the answer. Part two of the answer is, and if Hashem wouldn't have taken us out, we would still be there. Part three, even if we are men of wisdom, understanding, and experience, and knowledge of Torah, mitzvah aleinu l'saper b'yetzias Mitzrayim. It's still a mitzvah to tell the story, even if we know the story better than anyone else. Shulchan Aruch paskins, even if a person's by himself, which unfortunately might happen this year, many people by themselves for the Seder, there still is an inyan in saying, speaking, discussing with oneself the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. Even if we all know it, we still have to discuss it. And the more a person discusses the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, he is meshubach, he is praiseworthy. So how is this the answer? What's going on with these three parts? So we start with Avadim Hayinu. We were slaves in Egypt. Now, is that really part of the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim? Is that really part of the story of the Exodus from Egypt? That's not the Exodus from Egypt. That's how we got to Egypt. The second half of Magid goes back and says, Aromi Ovid, we go back to Lavan. That we go back to Terach. That Adam Avinu's father did Avodah Zarah. What shaykhs, what connection to the redemption? We're talking about the Exodus. Why are we starting from Avadim Hayinu? We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. So the Gemara in Pesachim says that this mitzvah that we have, the unique mitzvah on the Leil HaSeder, is to be maschil b'gnosim b'sayim b'shvach. To start with the low position we were in. We were slaves. We came from idol worshippers ourselves before Egypt. Avram Avinu's father was a big idol worshiper. Why do we have to start from it? The Gemara says, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of talking about, discussing the Exodus, you must start from how bad things were the slavery in Egypt, and even going generations earlier, that we come from humble beginnings. Why is that so important? So the Malbim says that in order to understand what we have that's good, we have to understand where we're coming from. The redemption only has meaning in as much as it's coming from a difficult gullus, a difficult exodus, a difficult diaspora. The good that we have only means something to us when we realize that we come from a time we didn't have that good. Now, we can't just go. My kids were complaining today. Like today was like the story of the camel's back. We haven't left the house in weeks. They want to go out. They want to go somewhere. So we don't appreciate that for the past, since we're all alive, you can pretty much go wherever you want. There's no quarantine. There's no stay at home. There's no restrictions. There's no fear going to the shopping center. There's no fear. Our grandparents had fear when they went outside. We've never experienced that. So now we can appreciate more what we had, and Be'ez Hashem will have soon again, because it's been taken away from us. When a person breaks an arm or a leg, then they appreciate the arm and the leg. All of a sudden they realize all the things, when you throw out your back, you realize all the things that your back does for you. When you can't move your thumb, if a person breaks his thumb, Chas Shalom, all of a sudden he realizes how crucial a thumb is. If we want to understand the Yitzias Mitzrayim, we have to appreciate the context. We have to understand the beginning. That's the Malbim. The Koshnitzer Maggid says, why do we start with Gnus and we end with Shvach? To teach us, no matter how far a person is, the Yidden, as we mentioned before, on the 49th level of Tumah, no matter how far a person has gone away from Yiddishkeit, you can always come back. You can end up at Matan Torah in 49 days, from the 49th level of Tumah all the way to the highest level. Almost 100 levels the Yidden went. No matter how low a person is, he can always reach tremendous heights. And a third pshat I heard, this is my cousin, Rabbi Shmuel Silber from Baltimore. I think it's his own pshat. He wanted to say that the concept of Maskil B'Gnus and Messiah B'Shvach is a tremendously important lesson, especially in this day and age, and that is, it's the lesson of patience. Patience. That it was bad, and it was bad for 210 years. It was really bad for many, many years. And the Yidden might have been saying to themselves, what's going on? Hashem has forsaken us. He doesn't love us. Patience. First has to be patient. There's no instant gratification. You have to see everything in historical context. Maskil B'Gnus and Messiah B'Shvach is teaching us to have patience. Right now it seems like the timing of everything, and it's Pesach is coming, and we're stuck in our patience. If they're patient, to realize that the same Hakadosh Baruch Hu that took us out of Mitzrayim is putting us right now in this coronavirus situation. This is going to come up throughout the Seder, because it's a great mashal for what was back then for us to relate to it. The same Hakadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim is right now with us, bringing us this Magefa. We have to figure out, which we will discuss in the coming week and a half or so, why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu doing it? We're going to try to be mechazik ourselves and figure out some sort of message. But Hashem is doing it for the best. And we can't see that right now. But Maskil B'Gnus, Messiah B'Shvach. We start with the slavery, and then we see how that led to the redemption. We have to be patient. We have to realize that when I see the big picture, it's all going to make sense. 3 ideas of why we're Maskil B'Gnus, Messiah B'Shvach. Another idea from Avad Ma'inu, and then maybe we'll end with that, or we'll do another 1 or 2 more things. Vitzig Isaac Chaver says that when the Baal Hagadah writes that we were slaves to Mitzrayim, and Hashem took us out biyad chazaka uvizroya netuya, with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. What are these 2 things? What's the mighty hand? What's the outstretched arm? So he says the mighty hand was the actual punishment, was the dam, svardeya, kinim, the makas, the plagues, and the kriyas yamsuf. That was the yad chazaka. The zroy netuya, the imagery is an outstretched arm. That's when a person raises their hand. When the parent, hopefully doesn't raise his hand, but raises his voice maybe, and intimidates the child, or the teacher intimidates the student in a healthy way, obviously, to get them to pay attention, to better themselves. The punishment the Egyptians received in Mitzrayim was a yad chazaka. From the Mitzrayim's perspective, Hashem was punishing them, was hitting them with his hand. For the Jewish people, though, it was a zroya netuya. It was that outstretched arm where the parent is showing the kid, if you don't shape up, you're going to get hit. You're going to be punished. We have to realize that we have to view what happened to the Egyptians as if you don't follow the Torah, if we don't connect, if you don't listen to Hashem, look what happened to them. Whatever happens in the world is a lesson for the Jewish people to learn from. Whenever something would happen, an earthquake, anything, the Chavetz Chaim would say, "Was will the Tata von uns? Was will the Tata von mir?" What does Hashem want? What does Avinu Malkeinu want from us, from me? Anything that happens in the world is always addressed at the Jewish people as a message. That's the Zorei Netuya. But you can ask at the Seder, what's this Yad Chazaka and Zorei Netuya? Again, whatever I'm telling you now, convert it in your mind into question answer, into prodding at the Seder. What's this double lashon? Yad Chazaka, Zorei Netuya. One answer is, Yad Chazaka is the patch Hashem gave the Mitzrayim, and the Zorei Netuya is that outstretched arm which served as a warning to the Yidden, to the Jews. This is how it works, the Kadosh Baruch Hu. If we listen to him, we get rewarded, and if not, then the other thing happens. The Avodim HaYidnu goes on and says that if Hashem wouldn't have taken us out, we'd still be there. So the obvious question is that true? Regimes come, regimes fall, and all kingdoms, not the same. So there's different answers. We'd have the mentality still. If there wasn't that break of Hashem, like ripping us out, that birth from Mitzrayim, we would have still had the mentality. The basic Nakuda is for us to realize, the basic point is for us to realize that it's relevant to us. The Baal Hagadah is telling us that Rebbe Yid, this is not just a historical event that happened to your great-great-great-great-grandfather. If this wouldn't have happened, you'd be a different person. This happened to you. We, on some level, experienced the Yetzias Mitzrayim because if it wouldn't have happened, our lives would be different today. So it's relevant to us. That's why it says, and if Hashem wouldn't have taken us out, we would still be there, whatever that means, figuratively, literally. Excuse me. The point is that it's relevant to us. And therefore, that leads to the third part of Avodim HaYidnu. And therefore, even if we're knowledgeable and we know everything that's going on, we know the entire story, we still have to say it over. Why? Number one, for the future generations, because they're not going to know it. We have to tell it to them. And also says Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver that the escape from Mitzrayim was a natural impossibility. It wasn't possible. It was impossible. Mamash wasn't shayach. We have to recount the story, even for all chachamim, because that which I witness makes a bigger impression on me than that which I know is true, that which someone told me. So the idea is, even though we're all chachamim, we're all mavainim, number one, we have to make sure we talk about the story for the future generations who it relates to. And number two, we have to try to experience it. The Rambam says you have to see it as if you yourself left Mitzrayim. Enact it and feel it. If you enact it and you feel it, then it'll make much more of an impression on the person than just telling over the story. That's the idea of Avodim HaYidnu. Very quickly, let's just finish up this part of Magid. The next, just to give it surah, a form to it. The next part goes into Ma'aseh Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, the Tanoim who were sitting in Bnei Brak. They were discussing Yetzias Mitzrayim the entire night. The Baal Hagadah brings that these great sages were discussing the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim to show us this fact that even if a person is a big chacham, he knows everything, he still has to discuss the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's why that's brought. Once we mentioned Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, we mentioned a second Meimer, Gemara in Mishnah Brachos, Gemara Brachos, the famous Gemara that he's like 70 years old, which also discusses the mitzvah of remembering the story from Egypt, Yetzias Mitzrayim, all other nights of the year. That gets put in as well. Then we come to the four sons. In the four sons, very quickly, we see there the concept, the source for the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim by the kid who does not know how to ask questions. There we see that we're obligated to prod him, like we've been saying this entire shir, to get him to ask the question. So we bring all the four sons. Because of the Eino Dei Elisha, the one who can't ask, that teaches us that we have an obligation to get the children to ask. So the Be'ez Hashem will end here. Tomorrow night, maybe we'll finish up the Magid, and the shir for tomorrow night is going to be a number of different pieces of advice, what to look out for to make sure the Seder runs smoothly from the perspective of the mitzvah halayla, how to make sure the mitzvahs are done properly, as well as just the whole Seder. The whole thing should be done in an efficient way, in a fun way, and people shouldn't be nervous about doing things in the wrong order. That'll be tomorrow night. So shkoyach everyone for joining tonight. If you have any questions, please feel free to call, email, and Be'ezer Hashem will all be prepared and all have a successful Seder. Have a good night.